Let's have Mario Murillo in to talk about Mario. Good to see you, my friend.
Hello. Hey, Lance, how you doing, man? I want to tell you that civil disobedience is what filled that tent behind me. I was told by the governor of California not to do tent crusades. And so we went to Fresno on the word of the Lord. And he said, the law is being broken by the governor, and the higher law of the Constitution is the law you are to obey, mostly the law of God. But I want you to understand that, now we're in Los Angeles. I just want to mention at the top of our time, because you're right, we are on a roller coaster ride. This is going to get really exciting. We are doing a tent crusade in the Los Angeles Fairgrounds, which you can't get in. We got in. We got all kind of regulations. We defeated them all. Our 5,000 seat tent is going up on Sunday, September 10th through the 13th it's also called the Fairplex in Pomona. And we got 100 churches unified for it. And we're excited. We got 600 workers that are flying in from across the country. We believe that by start time, we're going to reach 1,000 volunteers. That's our number. But it'll be full like this behind me, and miracles are going to happen. It's going to be an amazing event.
September 10th through the 13th. And by the way, they've got proofforla.com. If you're listening to this on a podcast, go to proofforla.com. And you don't want to miss it, the 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. I can tell you this, that when you're in an environment where you're seeing and sensing the move of God and the miracles and healings happening, it's electric. It's life-changing. And it's going to change the lives of people that are going to be there. And if you're in the LA area, man, you got no excuse for it's right in your own backyard. You don't want to go get the DVD. You want to be there and get the experience. So has the Lord already told you what you're going to preach on, or how does that work?
The one thing about woke that is such a soul-winning theme is that it is not accountable for what it does to a life. In other words, we get to see what they believe. We get to see the rules they enact. What we don't see is the ultimate outcome of woke on the individual life. And what that does is it creates an emptiness, a loneliness, a despair, and that God uses to prepare the soil for people to turn to God. That's why I believe that we have two extremes in America. We have a ruling class that doesn't understand that there are millions of Americans. Every once in a while, there's a flash of their fury. It'll be against a Bud Light can, or it'll be against child endangerment and the sex trade, or it'll be a country song that will come out talking about the rich men north of Richmond. And that flash, that moment, that breaking of the thing is what Jesus said, when you look at the sky, how to predict the weather, but you don't understand the signs of the time. So America, in its current condition, is made up of two polarities, a ruling class and masses of people that want God on a level I didn't even see during the Jesus movement. The greatest frustration of our ministry is a shortage of workers that can handle the harvest. So not only are people getting converted, they're young. Not only are young people getting converted, but their conversions are fierce. And the signs and wonders that God is doing, half of them are among the youth. 50% of every healing that we see in a tent now is a young person, healed of some dramatic physical illness as a demonstration of the power of God. But the folks watching need to understand, the times are evil. They're going to want to lock us down again. But there is an undercurrent of a hunger for God that I have never seen in my life.
Well, you also made a comment I thought was interesting, and that is that you've had your finger on the pulse of the church. When you have 100 churches working with you, you know more about where the churches are at than most people. And you're saying that where there was a reluctance to speak up and a caution about what to say, you're seeing more of an abandonment now. What do you attribute that to? Is that because the pastors are feeling more the temperature of the people wanting them to speak up? Or is it because the pastors themselves are are changing. What's your take on that?
The first thing they've understood is who their real competition is and who their threat is. They've come to that. Persecution does that. These pastors have awakened to the fact that where we agree is so much more important now than where we disagree. We have a common enemy, we have a common hope. And it's like Benjamin Franklin said, we either hang together or we'll hang separately. And men and women of God in the pulpit in California, and by the way, I'm going to say something outrageous. People don't realize how close California is to flipping into becoming a red state. And that's because of the destruction of every meaningful aspect of that state by leftist policy. Now the eyes are opening and they're saying, here's what you did to my child. Here's how you destroyed my business. Here's how you turned San Francisco into a ghost town. Here's how you turned downtown LA into a third world hovel of people that are homeless. Crime off the hook, pain everywhere, destruction imminent. And the church is suddenly the answer. This is why I want to tell you the most vulnerable person on earth right now is the pastor that is giving a TED talk mixed with a flavoring of New Age, a little stand-up, because they're not reading the people. The people want a word from God. They want the Bible. They want doctrine. They're not even as enamored in worship as they were at one time. They want to feel the presence of God. We have found ourselves not against worship, but we are against the kind of trance state that a lot of people feel they need to do behind Christian music. The outside world is coming into our meetings and saying, I need power over what's destroying me. I need an answer. I need good and evil to be delineated. I need bottom lines. I need understanding of where I'm hurting. And that is electrifying pastors to preach a fiery word, and it's growing their churches. And I'm telling you, I can report churches that have doubled and multiplied and quadrupled because, number one, they stayed open during the pandemic. Number two, they've realized that the crowds that are coming are there for a living answer to the pain that their life is in.
So when you look at the persecution that is potentially on the future, if the government continues to be tone deaf, I don't get the impression that they're listening. I think that the way that they're going forward with the new vaccine enthusiasm, the way they're discussing masking, it's almost like they live in this kind of cloud bubble where they only hear what they want to hear to do what they want to do. And there's a disconnect. It's almost like a Marie Antoinette type thing with the common man out there. This is, to your point, you've got the elites now against the average person, but there's such a contempt for the average person's concerns. They're not even factored in to the equation. So it's very possible that this government could begin to mandate and force compliance on things that people aren't willing to comply with. And it might be helpful for you to walk us through the Christian worldview at a moment like this, because we are by nature. I mean, I was in the Trump inauguration in 2016.
Right.
The contrast couldn't be more obvious to me. On one street, I'm escaping Antifa, blowing up limousines and breaking Starbucks windows. On the other street, they have dividers, and there's lines of Christians in this zigzag formation singing as they're waiting to go in to a building to go hear some Christians preach. One side of the street's anarchy and rebellion and violence, which, by the way, got overlooked. It was more disastrous in a way than January 6th was in terms of the overt acts of violence. On the other side, you've got compliance with sheep just trying to keep order and singing. So I'm concerned that maybe some Christians maybe need to know there are verses in the Bible that give us reasons to actually defy the ruling powers. So Romans 13 is a classic treatment of this, and I've heard you walk people through it before. Share with us your insight on this.
Okay, ruling powers and authorities are not all from God. The ones that are, the Christians are to obey. Many of the governments that are from God are not necessarily overtly Christian, like you watch in the Bible. King Cyrus was doing the will of God. Daniel operated under Nebuchadnezzar. So these kings and authorities, they had something in common, and that's in Romans 13. Because pastors and leaders, some of them love to read Romans 13 and say, we are to blindly submit to government. That's what it says. No, Romans 13 tells us to respond and obey authority. And authority is defined as there is no authority except from God. Now, read that the same way. If it's true authority, it came from God. Then the next verse you need to look at is verse 3. It says, no authority from God is a threat to the righteous. King James says, if you do good, then the authority will not threaten you. Therefore, whenever a threat or you're told to obey God, I mean, imagine the schizophrenia that you get into. God, you told me in your word and through your spirit not to do these things. Now the world's government is telling me to do those things. And so if I misinterpret Romans 13, I'm going to find myself blindly following laws that are against God. And so you go to Acts chapter 5 and you see the proof verse. This is the QED right here. This is the bottom line. When you go through the equation, it does. They looked at Peter and said, did we not strictly obey you not to teach or to preach in this name? And then they claimed, because you're trying to accuse us of murder and get us to be guilty of the blood of the crucifixion. Peter looks at him and says, we ought to obey. It was basically a question. We strictly told you to obey this law. Why didn't you obey it? Peter says we ought to obey God rather than man. When civil law violates God, our obligation is to obey God's law. Now, there's another wonderful verse. It's Psalm 94. It says, will you have fellowship with the throne that devises evil by law? Now, that proves something. Laws can be evil, and devised laws can be evil. Abortion was an evil law. What we did to marriage was through an evil law. And we are instructed to understand in a worldview when authority is in harmony with God, it's not trying to silence the church, it's not persecuting the righteous, it's not endeavoring to impede God's work in the earth. That civil authority is to be submitted to. When it violates God's word, it has ceased to be divine authority. It is rogue government. What we have in the White House is rogue government. And we understand that because if they felt they were valid, Lance, if the American White House believed they were valid, they would also be transparent. But when you hide, when you mutter, when you censor, when you refuse to answer questions or provide evidence, when you punish someone just for asking a question or misusing a pronoun, you're sending us a very clear signal. You are a criminal and you're a crime organization and you're doing it to stay in power. That brings us to what's going on right now. This is the moment where there have been several this year, starting on January the 2nd on a football field, then in a university chapel, then in a movie called Jesus Revolution, then shooting bullets into a can of Bud Light, then The Sound of Freedom, then a country song. There's been more than one wave of national frustration that says this is the pulse, the nerve of a nation ready to rise up. This is a nation that's ready to say, we're done with you. So what does a Marie Antoinette or a tyrannical authority that is, as you said, disconnected? They immediately crush the opposition. They begin to do stupid things like the indictments. All of these indictments are as silly and as vapid and as pointless and as without merit as they can possibly be. But they're going to be done because this ruling class is losing its grip. That's why you have a Joe Rogan, a Tucker Carlson, an Elon Musk, and Bill Maher, and other voices suddenly saying this wokeness is crazy. It's not working. It's destroying cities. It's erasing America's gains. And that is where the church has a pivotal role, because we can provide the definition of what's going on. If we weren't being ashamed or hypocritical on our own, we could be the clarion voice that would point to this nation the way Daniel explained the nightmare to Nebuchadnezzar. He said, Nebuchadnezzar, this is what you dreamed. This is what it means. And he fell before God. And I believe that reverent, clear preaching, that power from God, is what's going to change America right now. That's why I'm raising my voice more than ever. That's why I'm less compromised than I've ever been and less afraid, because I know that the enemy is vulnerable like never before.
And it's part of the reason why I have a hope that the preaching of the gospel is going to continue to have a public influence, because the enemies of Jesus couldn't arrest him during the day for fear of an uprising among the people. The populist movement, or the movement of people, they had to do it at night. They had to arrest him at night and try to set up the trial in such a way that they could get a conviction illegally to accomplish their ends. Nothing much has changed. But when you have the multitude, as we have right now, beginning to experience this discontent, and the clear message that we're all kind of getting is that the people that are in charge are trying to force themselves on you like parental authority that you didn't ask to be your parent. And and once you get that sense that there's this authority enforcing its agenda on you in the American culture, I think it feeds the populist backlash that I've been wondering about. But to your point, from Bud Light to I think Target also is in there. The evidence is that without coordination, there's wide-scale pushback, which is why your comment about a call for massive resistance against evildoers, I think is accurate. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I believe that as time goes on, there are people that are watching, even the indictments that are with Trump, I watched something the other day that was so clear. It was actually clips of footage of Stacey Abrams and Hillary Clinton, and it was 8 Democrats, all from the 2015 and 14 and 16 and 18, and all saying the dangers of the manipulation of the voting machinery, the vulnerability to our democracy, because they were afraid that the technology could be used against them. But they all voiced clearly an anxiety about the potential of election interference through the computer technology. And what's fascinating to me is, even with that evidence, from the Democrats themselves, the arguments being made that there's this RICO Act of mafia coordination against a legitimate election, which, when you say it's absurd, people need to understand. What they're saying is, if you saw 2,000 Mules, Dinesh D'Souza's movie, and you could see maybe a dozen other evidences of real bizarre anomalies that did not have any explanation, you would have a reason to say, oh, there's definitely been theft. Has it been enough to affect the total election? We need to find out. Something's wrong. But to even mention that it's wrong is now being considered a crime similar to the mafia trying to organize the theft of an election. It's an absolute absurdity. It's an absurdity on the face when you look at, these are the same claims and concerns that Democrats have had. So how do they pull it off? They pull it off because I'm sorry to say, it's the cowardice and the weakness of those who should be standing up. And this is a source of concern. The average Joe, I think, is going to push back. But a lot of the folks that are like in the legislative office in Georgia, where I think we have 121 seats to 90 seats where the Democrats are, we're not watching any of them say, hey, what's going on? We should maybe be cutting off funding. Our tax money's paying for this kangaroo court lynching. And the legislators don't want to raise their voice because the cowardice is, I'm sorry to say, in the elites. And the elites is anyone who stands to lose a job or privilege in government who doesn't stand with truth and with the people. Does that make sense?
Total. One of the desperate needs of this hour, Lance, is the spirit that Ezra had on him when he just began to pray. And in his prayer, he did something remarkable, something that Americans need right now. The reason, and I look into the camera and I say, why can't we galvanize? Why can't we unify? Why can't we get behind righteousness and become aware of this? Because we still don't see it affecting our individual life. It hasn't jumped into the intimate circumstances of our life. That was true up until they went after the children. Now it brought it home. It's clear that the left doesn't believe parents have rights. Now, take Bonta, the Attorney General of California. He is suing the school district in Chino, California, right near where our tent's going to be. He's suing them because the school board voted to have the parents know and be notified before their child is given counseling for changing their gender, or if they're using a pronoun other than their biological gender, that the parents must be notified. And they put that in law. So now here's a state where rape, murder, theft, destruction, and absolute despair and homelessness. But the Attorney General is fixated on one thing. We're going to sue the parents for wanting to know that what their kids are going through at school. We're going to prove they don't have a right to that. There is no version of that that looks right or makes sense. That is the pivotal action of a despairing lunatic fringe. What Elon Musk calls it, the woke mind virus. The woke mind virus. And it always acts in its own worst self-interest because it's galvanizing parents. It's creating coalitions that weren't there before. This is what I believe needs to happen. You that are watching have got to realize that what's going on with these indictments is not against Trump, it's against you. It's a mechanism in place for a powerful ruling class to say, we can use the courts, we can use your money, even without your permission, to destroy any voice, any political enemy that we have. That's where the new American Revolution is about to dawn. That's what's going to happen. Mass civil disobedience. Because this time we know. We know that the mask doesn't work. We know that our kids were damaged. We know all these things now. That's why we will not let it happen again.
And you know, we had, I was on an interview with Peter McCullough, and he just flat out said what he gets canceled and he gets deplatformed to say. But here's a prestigious doctor saying, we now have protocols. We'll tell you exactly how over-the-counter drugs can get rid of the spike protein, which we have seen is so damaging to people's health as a result of the vaccine. And he said, of course, you know, the vaccine, which was basically put the gain-of-function research and technology came out of Chapel Hill. It was in Carolina, and then it went to Wuhan because Fauci brought it over there so that he could elude Obama's restraint on restrictions on working with germ warfare. And then they perfected this thing, the gain-of-function virus, in Wuhan, and it got out from Wuhan onto the United States. What was amazing to me was through the EcoHealth Alliance. That was the corporation that was able to do it from Chapel Hill. And he said he literally could go down a list of irrefutable facts pointing out where we had originated, developed, took it to Wuhan. Wuhan then released it. Boom, it affected the ballot, phenomenon, all that stuff. What I'm saying is something interesting is happening in that we're now out of a period of mental fog. When these things were taking place, the instinct of human beings in America, my instinct is to try to attribute it to some natural cause, not to the mischief of elites that are not accountable for their behavior and who to this day are not being held accountable for what they've done, which emboldens them to do more. Except we're not under the fog of war right now. We're under the lucid clarity of an enlightened state. And I think that this lucidity is going to continue to dispel the confusion that has been in the immobilized masses, and the masses are going to be mobilizing. They need to meet with you in September. I want to do another show if we can hold you over. I want to talk to you. I got some updates for you on this very subject of what's happening with the mutilation of children as ground zero in the Mama Bear movement. But September 10th through 13th, you've got 100 churches working together. Once again, what are people going to do?
They're going to see miracles. You need to bring someone that needs healing. Under this tent right here, you're going to see the glory of God. It's the Fairplex in Pomona, also known as the Los Angeles County Fairground. Sunday, September the 10th, 7 o'clock every night. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 10th through the 13th. Bring someone. You will not regret it.
You know, I saw your blog post on that. You pointed out Azusa. You pointed out Billy Graham's Los Angeles Crusade. You pointed out the Jesus movement. You had Catherine Coleman. You had Youth with a Mission. You had so many movements have come out of California that we cannot write off California. As California goes, so goes the nation. Right now, California is going to hell in a handbasket, and it's so bad, it's ironic. It's almost hilarious that Gavin Newsom is the guy they want to trot out as the poster child for, hey, he could bring this to your state. And I got a feeling something ain't going to work here. Can they support you financially? Because you are out on a limb again. At proofforla.com, can they make a donation to this?
If they're going to do that, it's best to go to MarioMurillo.org. Just MarioMurillo.org. And thank you for that, Lance.
Friends.
MarioMurillo.org. And why would they pick Gavin Newsom? I know that we're supposed to end this show, but I got to get this in. Even though Gavin Newsom has presided over the most disastrous budget, the most inept government, the most completely insane policies California has ever known, why would he qualify as the Democratic candidate? Because he has the one skill that is most needed, the ability of sleight of hand to keep a populace from connecting their tragedy to his policies. That's what they need in the White House. Someone who can continue the lie. Continue, don't mind the man behind the curtain. That's his skill. That's how he works. That's why they want him.
Wow. And you know what that's called? It's called an angel of light, my friend. It's a seducing power to be able to mesmerize people into not connecting the dots. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to come back again tomorrow. You don't want to miss part 2 with Mario Murillo. Civil disobedience. Conflict is coming. The battle is intensifying, and it's coming down to a battle of righteousness and iniquity. And God, I believe, has set this fight as a fight we can win. We'll be back again tomorrow. Make sure you go to MarioMurillo.org and stand with Mario. God bless.
It's